All right, everyone. We will go ahead and get started with our Southern Nevada Clean Cities Coalition Fleet Manager Roundtable. Thanks, everyone. I will move forward with a quick introduction and agenda. We will move forward with some guest speaker presentations, and we will leave time for Q&A at the end. I have some quick tips for how to participate in the meeting. Sorry about that echo. Welcome. We encourage you to engage with us throughout today's session. Translation services are enabled. You can translate the meeting page or the live audio into another language by clicking on the translate button and selecting your preferred language from the drop-down menu. Closed captions are also available for this presentation. To enable captions, click the CC button located in the top right corner of your screen. As for questions and comments, we welcome your questions and feedback. Please submit your comments and questions in the chat box located next to the live stream presentation. If a question comes to mind during the presentation, please post it in the chat, and we will review as many questions as possible during the Q&A session at the end. Please be aware that this presentation is being recorded and will be available for viewing on the Clark County Department of Environment and Sustainability YouTube channel following the event. As for any technical problems, if you experience any difficulties viewing or hearing the presentation or the presentation freezes, please go ahead and refresh your meeting page. This resolves most of the streaming and audio issues. And thank you for joining us today. We're happy to have you on the call, and we look forward to hearing from you. The Southern Nevada Clean Cities Coalition has some meeting goals for our Fleet Manager Roundtables, and that's to share relevant information and industry-specific content with fleet managers and professionals. If you are not a speaker, please go ahead and mute your microphone. Once again, if you have questions, feel free to add them in the chat, and speakers will be sharing their contact information on the slides as well, so feel free to contact them at any time after the presentation. So a little bit about the Southern Nevada Clean Cities Coalition. SNCCC is a U.S. Department of Energy designated coalition in the Clean Cities and Communities Partnership. We are one of 81 different coalitions nationwide. Here you can see the map of the different locations in the U.S. And the vision is to create an affordable, reliable, and secure transportation energy future. And promoting, informing, and educating about alternative fuels to gasoline is one of the core goals. Here I'm sharing today's agenda. First up will be Dan Gage with the Transport Project. The name of the presentation is Renewable Natural Gas, the right solution right now. Jeff will be following next with speaking on behalf of the Propane Education and Resource Council, or PERC, speaking to Propane Autogas. And Paul Schaefer with LANDI Technologies will be presenting clean technologies for businesses on the move. We will have a brief Q&A after the first speaker due to time constraints, but feel free to drop your questions in the chat and we'll revisit them at the end of the meeting as well. All right, Dan, I'll go ahead and kick it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Rosalie. Thanks for everyone participating. Honored to be able to kick off this this focus on gaseous fuels. If you go to the next slide, I'll just share a little bit about the Transport Project and who we are. We're a national coalition of about 200 fleets. We represent vehicle and engine manufacturers, dealers, servicers, suppliers, fuel producers, providers, really everyone in that compressed or liquefied natural gas motor fuel space. Obviously, more and more natural gas on road used as on-road motor fuel is renewable natural gas. And we are based in Washington, D.C. So we do a little bit of advocacy, both federally and statewide. We do an awful lot of code standards and best practices and safety work, and then as a convening and education organization. Really going to tell you 4 reasons why RNG is the right solution right now. And if you go to the next slide, Rosalie, you'll see the next, the number one. RNG is a proven product. It is not a science project. It is available. It is scalable. It's reliable today. It is on the roads all across Las Vegas and Clark County, both in a variety of different applications. I'll share those in just a minute. It's not a disruptive technology, so it's a very clean fuel, a clean transportation outcome, but it's still a one-to-one replacement for traditional gasoline or diesel vehicles. And the beauty of our option is that we have a mature network of OEMs and suppliers and partners nationwide. Next slide, you can see just exactly all the different applications where there is an RNG fueled or CNG fueled vehicle on the road today, even in marine and rail as well. And Paul has some interesting information towards the end of the hour related to some of the lighter and heavier, lighter and medium duty vehicles. Next slide. Really, our sweet spot has been in refuse. 60% of all new refuse trucks on order in the US today are CNG fueled, powered by CNG. Certainly, many players in the Las Vegas metropolitan area are running CNG trucks. If you go to the next slide, we'll see just that transit investment, and we're happy to call the Las Vegas Area Transit Authority as a member and an entity that is running CNG buses up and down the strip and elsewhere. And then the next slide, you'll see exactly sort of where that third component's been, right? We've had trash, we've had transit, and now we're really excited about this new entry into the market with a 15-liter engine, sort of the freight truck side of things. And this is a product by Cummins. It is new to the North American market, but not new. A new engine. It's been in India and China for several years now, so they've got about 100 billion miles logged globally. We're just starting to see this. This engine's been in production. We're just starting to see deployment across North America, different fleets today. If you go to the next slide, you can see why we're so excited about this. Other natural gas products have addressed both light duty, and that's not on this Cummins sheet, but light duty and sort of mid-range, and then gone into the vocational. But that 15-liter now gets us into some really, really heavy haul applications and line haul type sleeper cabs. Next slide, please. Second reason, really a lot of the regulatory roadblocks that we've been up against the last 4, 5, 6 years, they've sort of been removed. If you go to the next slide, we'll see exactly this maze. I like to say this looks like Candyland, but the rules are far harder. It's more like Dungeons and Dragons, which was a game I could never figure out rule-wise. But there are a lot of federal initiatives that have been paused. GHG Phase 3. We're eager to see where EPA 27 comes out in the next couple of weeks. The endangerment finding is gone. When we look to regulatory work that's advanced in the states, it tends to come out of California and the West Coast, but advanced clean trucks is no longer gone. The NOx omnibus, we do still see some residual advanced clean fleets in California, and we're dealing with that. But really, that clean truck partnership is all on pause. And so this gives us a really brightening regulatory outlook where it just didn't have the previous sort of agenda had its finger on the scale for just one technology as opposed to, you deciding as a fleet what works best for you. Number 3 on the next slide, we're seeing growing fleet interest, right? Sustainability is still alive. People still care. Yes, cash is king, right? It's the bottom line, but we're still seeing companies that are making that move because either they want to reduce their economic footprint, or they're working for a company that wants to reduce its economic environmental footprint. Deployment challenges, I think, and the capacity issues, the amount of energy that might be needed to be brought onto site that are challenges with some of our other competing technologies like battery electric. I think more of that is being understood by fleets now, exactly how much power is needed and where they're going to get it and what that power is going to cost. And then I think we've seen with the crisis in the Middle East, the importance of stable fuel pricing and securing savings, right? And natural gas has always provided that. If you go to the next slide, I'll address all of these points just really, really briefly. Really, RNG gives you a better than zero transportation outcome. These are data points from the California LCFS program. All those pathways are all given a CI. All of those, right? Fuel that comes in, all this production is given a carbon intensity score. The mix of that last year for bio-CNG, which in essence is what RNG is when it is dispensed at the pump, and almost all natural gas, 98% of natural gas motor fuel dispensed in California is RNG. And last year, that carbon intensity of that mix was negative 198. So that means a big, large fleet could get, in essence, a carbon sink through their transportation options if they're running natural gas, renewable natural gas in California. Next slide, please. This is just an example of just the amount of power if you were running a 50 Class 8 heavy duty truck operation. The amount of power you would need is equivalent to charge that, right? Fast charging, the equivalent that you would need in that's run through the Empire State Building on any given day. And I think as fleets understand, they're testing some battery electric technology. They might like it, but they're realizing there are a lot of hurdles when it comes to powering those vehicles day in and day out. And then next slide, please. This is just an example from one of our member friends in the city of Tacoma. It's their solid waste services. You'll see that top line is what they would be paying if they were running their fleet on traditional diesel. The blue line below it is what they actually have been paying for natural gas. And you'll see in September 2024, that went down even further there with the arrow. That's when they moved to RNG. And that lower per monthly cost there was attributable to the sale of the RINs and the LCFS credits, their share of them once those were sold. It goes low and stays low all the way to December 25 when it then pops back up again to that CNG level. That's only because they hadn't yet received the proceeds from the sale of those RINs and credits for Q1 and Q2 of this year. But you can just see that disparity, especially at the end of that chart on the far right, as the fuel prices, diesel prices went up here in March and April, May, during the issues, geopolitical issues in Iran, with Iran. Just that big disparity. So fleets are still seeing that RNG advantage at the pump. And if you go to the next slide, our fourth reason is some favorable tax treatment. And I think there's a final slide after that too, Rosalie, that just shares. Yeah, we have an RNG Incentive Act. We had an alternative fuel tax credit that was 50 cents a gallon. That credit expired, and in its place came out 45Z, which goes to the producers, which is still great. It means that you're still going to be able to get some tax benefit by negotiating a portion of that credit from your producer wherever you get your RNG. But at the same time, we're working to reinstate that end user credit. This is just details on that credit. So if you're running natural gas now, we'd love to have you part of our coalition advocating for the reintroduction of this. And we've got a bill in Congress that has been introduced both in the House and Senate. We've got Republican and Democratic sponsors. We're just struggling and working and fighting this year to try to get it onto something that moves that might be bipartisan, which is a lot easier said than done, but we continue to work forward on that. And I think that when we are able to reintroduce or reestablish this $1 credit, it'll be a further incentive for fleets to consider moving over to natural gas. I know form follows financing, and considerable fuel savings over time really allows you to transition to something that's much cleaner, both from a criteria pollutant and carbon intensity side, and also save money and advance your operations at the same time. With that, my last slide is just a contact slide. I'm happy to take any questions try to stick around as long as I can to take some questions at the end.
Thank you, Dan. We appreciate you presenting today. Dominic, do you see any questions in the chat for Dan?
I'm monitoring the chat right now. Please feel free to submit any questions for our speakers. In that case, there is a question we can share, I think would be helpful that we have received in advance, which would be speaking to any fleet currently relying on diesel. Could you speak a bit more to what types of fleet operations would be the strongest fit for RNG?
Well, just share that in terms of transit and refuse, and certainly trucking, right? We say the three T's, TTT, trash, transit, trucking. Any, return to service operations are terrific. We have a lot of members like UPS, right, with fixed routes, but they use natural gas for middle mile, moving goods from one warehouse to the other. They also use it for delivery in neighborhoods in the brown vans that we're all used to. We represent WM, that's a trash hauler. We represent transit properties that are running both paratransit vans, but also larger vehicles, like large transit buses. We see it in airport operations and airport shuttles. We see natural gas growing in medium duty and vocational needs. And I think Paul will talk to some of those here towards the end of the end of the hour. That's really, I think Landi's specialty is in that sort of the Ford F-250, 350. We get into that sort of space on light duty, what's still considered work vans or a small transit van type operations. We've got fleets of all sizes, right? So we represent a furniture company in Florida that uses it in all their delivery vans. So anything from, class 2 to 8 is really an opportunity for natural gas.
Thank you so much for addressing that. We have received one question in public input. What lessons can Southern Nevada take from hydrogen deployments in California and Arizona?
Look, I think hydrogen is a really has some really unique promise. We are doing our company or our organization is doing more and more with our member companies that are doing more in hydrogen. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from CNG and LNG as hydrogen builds out. Availability of fuel is still going to be a big concern. But I know our members, our transit property members, I know that our members that are in the vehicle space, but also the fuel development, fuel producing space, see huge opportunity. Everything I've seen thus far, torque and power is terrific. It can be a one-to-one deployment. The big challenge you're going to have still remains, and was just going to be some time to work those issues through, has to do with the production of the fuel, moving it to where you need it, and then dispensing it, right? And so there are a lot of issues with, if you're going to do it with on-site electrolysis, can you produce enough fuel for your needs? I know that that's been a challenge for some transit properties in Southern California. And so then they brought in liquefied hydrogen, right? And they store it. But then when you do that, you've got an awful lot of boil off based on changing temperatures. And so you're basically buying all of this hydrogen at really an expensive price compared to diesel or natural gas or propane. And then you've got to basically vent some of it. So that boil off, you could have losses that are in the, 30, 40, 50%. So it's a lot of paid for fuel, expensive fuel that you boil off. But I think over time, as processes develop, as we see more and more deployment, there's some unique opportunities long term with hydrogen. I hope as that gets built out that the hydrogen community takes its lessons from the natural gas community and some of the challenges that we had with liquefied natural gas, 20 years ago. A lot
Thank
of
you so
lessons to
much.
learn.
I know that we're about to move on to the next presentation, so maybe we can just address this final question quickly. Are there any ways the transport project can assist or promote public fueling CNG/RNG infrastructure? We have seen a decline in public fueling in Southern Nevada.
Yeah, it's a chicken and the egg type thing, right? The more fleets that are signing on that want to access public stations or utilize public stations, stations will be built. A lot of the fleets that are transitioned to natural gas, they want to control that. They want to control their fuel, controlling their fuel controls their day, right? With redundancies and resiliencies and operational efficiencies. So what we've seen over time is that yes, a lot of those public stations, the fleets that relied on them have now brought their own behind the fence. It's a challenge. I think the 15 liter is going to change that because it's going to be a lot of more use of natural gas where it's not going to be on fixed routes because they get that torque and power. They've got longer range that, they can have a 1,200-mile range. And so I think in some of those gaps, you'll see reinvestment from some of our fuel producer members or dispensing members. But it's going to take, a partnership with area fleets. If they build, there was an old saying, if you build it, they will come. Same thing here. If fleets are converting and want access to public fueling, there'll be the market will respond.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And we're ready to move on to the next presentation, but please feel free to submit any questions or comments throughout.
Thank you, Dominic, for that. And thank you, Dan, for your presentation. Next up, we have Jeff, who will be speaking to Propane Autogas.
Great. Thank you very much, Rosalie. Good afternoon. My name is Jeff SEGER. I'm a consultant in the industry. I'm actually helping PERC out. I've done some consulting for them. And a person by the name of Joel Stolwith, his email will be at the end of the presentation. Excuse me, normally would do these, but was unable to make it. So I said, yeah, I'd love the opportunity to talk to you guys and sit in the roundtable. We'll have his email at the end if you need to contact him. Maybe go to the next slide. All right, so there's 4 attributes I'd like to elaborate a little bit on propane. First is affordability or slash low TCO. The next one is I'll share with you a little bit around availability, what vehicles it goes into. Reliability, or I'd really call it more resilience. I don't really have a slide on that, but I think the punchline here is, unlike you might have issues with EV where in cold weather, the operation and the range is just poor, or you get an ice storm that, ruins your grid or puts your grid down. You don't have those issues with propane. And then it's also a very sustainable fuel, ultra low NOx that I'll elaborate on, and near 0 PM. So it's a really good solution. A little fun fact, imagine most of you are at ACT Expo and you might know this, but there are a lot of propane vehicles running in the Las Vegas area. I've heard anywhere from about 900 to even 2,200, most of them taxi cabs. So I think they choose that mainly for the kind of what I'd call the bookends of this presentation, the affordable piece as well as the sustainable piece. If you maybe go to the next slide, please. Okay, I think this tells the story quite well. Maybe start out on the left-hand side, the map of the U.S. You can see here, these are prices per gallon or price per gallon for propane. And the first thing I'd like to say is notice they're all less than $2 per gallon. And there's really very little variation throughout the country. Looks like the low point's around $1.84 and the high point's $1.98. This was taken back on June 12th. These prices have even come down since the strait has opened. But point one is very low prices and pretty consistent throughout the states. Similar to that chart that Dan showed, there's not the volatility of propane that you see with diesel and gasoline. And while I don't have a chart, I think diesel spiked up 30-40% with this recent crisis, and here propane might be up 2 or 3%. So very low. So that makes it very easy if you're planning your budget. What your fuel prices are today are pretty much going to be fuel prices for tomorrow. And then I'd like to kind of maybe set everything on an apples to apples basis. I don't know if you've heard of what's called DGE, diesel gallon equivalent, but you might be saying, hey, I hear that propane doesn't have the energy density that gasoline or that diesel has. And so we have normalized that here and made up for that. And so you can see here that gasoline is up in the near $5 per range, diesel's in the $5 per range on a diesel gallon equivalent, and propane is less than $3 per gallon. So there's a good $2 difference between propane and diesel or gasoline, which takes us to the next slide. Provides a real savings for a fleet. And I'm sure you can measure these savings in terms of dollars per gallon, but also we like to look at it from a total cost of ownership. And this analysis was done by PERC, and you can see the various powertrains that are compared. And these are the total costs over the life of the vehicle. And total costs would be upfront costs as well as cost of maintenance, cost of fuel, cost of insurance, all those types of things. And yes, with propane, there is probably a $10,000 to $20,000 upfront cost that you have over, say, a gasoline engine. But you make it up in terms of fuel, that over $2 a gallon spread between gasoline and propane, or same goes for diesel, as well as maintenance. And I've got a slide in a minute, I'll elaborate more, but you don't have a diesel particulate filter, you don't have a DEF tank, you don't have DEF filters. In terms of oil changes, you use a lot less oil, less quarts per engine. So between those two factors, the TCO ends up being much more attractive for propane versus some of these other alternatives. Rosalie, if you go to the next slide, if you want to kind of say, well, what does that save me as a fleet manager or operations manager? Here we've done some calculations for different fleet sizes. It's pretty self-explanatory, but say you have a fleet of 10 vehicles, you run about 26,000 miles a year. Over a 5-year period, you'll save over $400,000, and that's total savings. So that takes into account some of these upfront costs that you have with propane. If you double that mileage, you get double the savings. And if you're still back in about the 26,000 miles per year range and you have 25 fleets, you can save well over $1 million. So, we'll get to it towards the end, but, propane is really good from an environmental standpoint and sustainability standpoint, but it's also a real savings to fleets. If we could go to the next slide, Rosalie. So I mentioned this, and I think, probably could just pause, meaning I think the picture says 1,000 words, but propane after treatment simplicity is superior to a diesel. For those of you who are familiar with diesel, diesel's been very good. It's a good solution in a lot of applications, but the after treatment has become quite complex over the years. And you can just see, a couple of SCR bricks, a diesel particulate filter, a diesel oxidation catalyst, and then many sensors, temperature sensors, NOx sensors, urea sensors, all those types of things. And remember, a minute ago I mentioned maintenance. I mentioned simplicity. Usually the simpler something is, the more reliable it is. So you don't have all these diagnostic fault codes and things like that with propane that you do have with diesel. I'll also say, as we talk about EPA 27, which is just around the corner here, I think we do know what the thresholds will be, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. But this complexity for diesel is going to become even larger. A couple of the manufacturers have chosen to add 2 heaters, one in front of the diesel oxidation catalyst and the other one in front of the SCR, and with a 48-volt alternator. And then also the other manufacturers have added another SCR called pre-SCR along with a doser. So complexity is only getting more whenever you talk about diesel, and you compare that to propane. Very simple after treatment, a 3-way catalyst. It's got a few sensors, a lambda sensor and maybe a temperature sensor, but very, very simple, and very simple in terms of an installation, in terms of operation, and saves in terms of maintenance. Maybe next slide, please. You might be saying, well, okay, where do I get this? The fuel providers can help you with this, and if you need some connections, either myself or Joel can provide that. But basically, this is what it looks like. You've got a tank, you've got a very simple compressor. The tank is relatively low pressure. It's running 100, 150 PSI, and the compressor is very simple as well. And I think, you might want to start out small so a fuel provider can help you and possibly install one of these. And then if you have a large fleet, then maybe it makes sense for you to own it yourself, but probably not in the beginning. And you can have this fuel on site, and that's how you get your fuel. If we go to the next slide, it shows a little bit in terms of, what kind of applications. And, I think the question was asked about natural gas. I think this picture talks very well around what I'd call the sweet spot for propane. It's return to base, so, less than 300 miles a day. The more miles you put on, the better. That's the better your TCO will be because you have to overcome some of those upfront costs. And then there's just a lot of applications. I think we all know a lot of propane in school buses. I think you hear of a 2 to 3 year payback, step in, walk-in vans in terms of delivery trucks, in terms of box trucks, all those types of things. Am I being okay? I get a little thing that says internet is unstable. Am I coming through, Rosalie?
You're coming through. We had a little bit of a tiny lag, but I'd say overall you're doing just great.
Okay, great. Thank you. And these vehicles, so the Ford F60, F750, the 150, 250, the E450, those are the base chassis. I'll go to another slide in a minute, but those are the base chassis you can get for Ford, and then you can have it configured to whatever kind of vehicle you'd like. I'll say one other thing. There's a company called Nexio, and they'll be launching a bobtail truck here within about a year or so. They'll have a very interesting new engine as a part of that vehicle, and that will become on the market. So it'll provide even yet another option. Maybe go to the next slide, please. Okay, there's one other option, and it's called Bi-Fuel by Alliance Autogas. And here you have the option, you can have the vehicle is configured to run on gasoline or propane. So say you run out of propane, you need gasoline, you can get that very easily. And the applications are the similar ones as what I mentioned on the previous slide. And you can see on the right-hand side what OEMs and what vehicle types that Alliance does these upfits on. Next slide, I think, is sustainability. Yeah, so this along with the low cost, I think, are really the two selling points of propane. And I mentioned the simple after treatment. So that simple after treatment is actually running at levels that are much lower than what we're going to see come January of next year with EPA 27. Today, the NOx level, the threshold set by EPA is 0.2 grams per brake horsepower hour. And come January of next year, it'll be 0.035, or at least we think that's the case. And that's why I mentioned that, extra hardware, heaters, and things like that will be needed for gasoline. Well, propane engines are already certified well below that 0.035. They're running at 0.02 today. And that's done with today's hardware, so extra hardware will not be needed. Virtually 0 PM, so that's another nice attribute. So, I think we think a lot around zero emission vehicles and the beauty of those in cities where you don't want all this NOx and PM. Whenever it comes to a propane vehicle, it's very, very, almost zero. It's a near zero emission vehicle because of this ultra low NOx characteristic and low PM characteristic. And then you can also get a reduction in greenhouse gases. Renewable propane is available, especially in some states like California and Oregon and places like that. And the carbon intensity, it's not as good as renewable natural gas. As Dan showed, renewable natural gas is in the -100, almost -200 range. But nonetheless, you can get a nice substantial reduction in carbon intensity, significantly different than, say, diesel or gasoline. And then just by itself, some of the kind of upcoming engines like this Nexio will probably deliver a CO2 reduction relative to diesel, even without renewable propane. Okay, I think that's it. As I mentioned, I'm stepping in for Joel. Here's his email. If you've got questions, I'll try to answer whatever questions come up, but if I can't answer them, then we can get back to you. And here's Joel's email. We don't have my email, but if you look me up on LinkedIn, it's Jeff Seeger. I'll try to field whatever kind of questions or follow-up you might have. So thank you. Any questions?
Thank you so much for that presentation, Jeff. If there are any questions, please submit those now. Not seeing anything coming through public input currently. But once again, please feel free to reach out with the contact information on the screen
Very
or
good. And
via LinkedIn.
I'm on
Yes.
till the end, so if questions come up at the end, I'll try to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you, Jeff, for that presentation. We appreciate you. And we can go ahead and hand the speaker over to Paul.
Okay, thanks, Rosalie and Dominic. Appreciate the invite. I mean, I'm excited about natural gas. I've been doing this. I counted up not too long ago, calculating how long I've been doing this in 1997. So I'm coming up on 30 years. It dawned on me when they introduced me recently as a veteran, and I didn't know what they were talking about. So I've seen a lot of changes in the industry, but I couldn't be more excited than where we are today. Back many years ago, we would often refer to natural gas as an alternative fuel. And I don't like that term anymore. I think a better term is advanced fuel. Certainly, some of those early systems had their issues. They didn't work maybe like they were supposed to, and technology has come a long way. And now these products work seamlessly and are very reliable, very durable. I started in the Air Force in 1997 doing this. I ran the Air Force natural gas program. We deployed, I think it was about 300 natural gas units across 30 different military bases. And then I got stuck in this and enjoy it a lot. I work for LANDI. We are a global company. We've been doing this for 70 years, 70. So we're certainly not a startup. We are a pioneer in the industry and a reference point on many technologies. In the US, we're headquartered in Los Angeles. We design, we develop, we integrate. We also handle all of our own IP software in conjunction with Ford. So a lot of the products that we offer are on the Ford platform, since they are the primary driver of commercial vehicles in the Class 2B to Class 7 space. Next slide, please. So what I'm trying to do here is just have a basic conversation. I tried to recall where I would have been if I was starting out and just learning a little bit about it. I realize there's varying levels of expertise when it comes to these various technologies. CNG, that's all I ever knew it as, CNG, compressed natural gas. We heard Dan present very well related to renewable natural gas. And you might be saying, like, what's the difference between CNG, RNG? Do I need a different system? How does this work? And the reality is the system's the same. So whether it's a CNG station, RNG, you're getting RNG fuel or CNG fuel, the technology from a vehicle system standpoint is the same. So there's no difference. They both operate around 3,600 PSI. One of the things that's unique is with Class 8 vehicles, those are typically designed as a natural gas engine from the outset. That would be true of Cummins. They do the 12-liter, 15-liter, as Dan was sharing. But on the Class 2B, Class 7, there's really no OEM that produces a natural gas vehicle. We do that for Ford. But what happens is it's produced as a gasoline engine. Typically, what happens is the vehicle's then ordered with hardened seats and valves. They call that a gaseous fuel prep package. What it means in basic terms is that they come with hardened seats and hardened valves. Why is that important? Well, you're operating a vehicle on gas and not a liquid. So certainly the engine's going to operate at higher temperatures. So it's the way that, in this case, Ford ensures that the vehicle has durable life as it was intended to. Okay, next slide. Okay, again, this is trying to make it simple. Like, what does this mean? What does a natural gas vehicle mean? And let's talk about it as it relates to gasoline or diesel. So I kind of made two different sections here. One are the similarities, driving experience. This is very important because if you don't get driver buy-in, it can be a difficult road at times. The experience is the same. You hop in, you turn the key, and you drive the vehicle. You're not going to really notice any differences between the operation from gasoline to natural gas. Very similar. Fueling times. You're not charging for hours at a time. It's very similar. You're fueling up in minutes at a high pressure station, fast fuel station, I should say. Payload. One of the things, and I should say it, that natural gas vehicles are primarily driven by commercial fleets. It's not typically something that you see on the residential or retail side. And so when you start talking commercial, you're talking, they do two things. They move goods or they move people. That's all they do. And so why is that important? Because if you sacrifice payload, it becomes a big deal. If you can transport less passengers or you move less goods, it costs the company more money, the price of goods go up, and it becomes very problematic for that business. Range, very similar. There's a lot of customized packages that you can do with natural gas. Usually what I try to do is whatever the customer would expect from a gasoline or diesel range perspective, I try to match that, which is usually very easy to do. In maintenance, Jeff mentioned biofuel. So in the case of biofuel, that means that the vehicle can operate 100% on gasoline, or it can operate 100% on natural gas in this case. And in some cases, you can flip a switch and change. In other cases, it automatically switches when you run out of natural gas. Why is it similar? Because if you're operating a biofuel vehicle, gasoline, things like spark plugs, filter changes are all going to be the same. You're going to still have to do that because it operates as a gasoline vehicle. So some of the differences, you don't want to pull up to your gasoline station and try to fill up your CNG vehicle, right? So it requires its own infrastructure. Dan touched on that briefly, where some of it is behind the fence. Sometimes it's public, but certainly infrastructure can create challenges if there's nothing nearby. Typically in the large metropolitan areas, it's no issue. Upfront cost. So there's a cost to convert it. There's a cost to add the CNG system onto this gasoline vehicle. You have to decontent the gasoline, then you need to add back the CNG RNG system. And so there's a cost to do that. However, there's also savings on the fuel cost side. So when you're looking at upfront costs, you also have to factor in, and again, Jeff touched on this as well on the propane side. What are those fueling costs? Typically, if you're a large fleet like a UPS, Amazon, they have negotiated rates with suppliers, and typically are very aggressive and can do quite well on that. Maintenance, we found across the board, we typically recommend that you follow the manufacturer's guidelines. In this case, Ford, we have some of our own guidelines, but many extend out oil changes because the vehicle's burning cleaner. It doesn't need to get those cycles, those PMIs as often. So we found across the board that maintenance costs typically are less. Emissions, Dan touched on that, especially if we're dealing with RNG, the carbon intensity number being negative. So that is certainly a benefit. Those fleets, companies that are wanting to achieve certain sustainability goals, emissions play a big role in that. Certifications. You can't just go out there and convert your vehicle to natural gas. It requires either an EPA certification, or in the case of California, a CARB certification. That goes back to, I believe, 1992 when it was a Clean Air Act. Basically, if you touch it, you tamper with it, and that's illegal. So we go through the full process of getting our products certified. And that's one of the things you should look at. If an upfitter or a company is offering systems, ask for that, make sure that they have the certification. And then also OEM testing. We do OEM testing with Ford, basically making sure that our system is as durable as they would expect it to be on their gasoline or diesel units. Next slide, please. They're very common. That's the bottom line on this slide. Although we don't see as much as 23 million in the US, we do see a few 100,000 that operate here. And people often ask me, like, why is that the case? And those are really three main things. Number one is typically there's more infrastructure overseas. They're dealing with very low system costs and higher traditional fuel costs. So if at the outset, you're 5 times the cost of what it would cost to fill with propane or natural gas, and you're paying a fraction of the cost for the upfront investment, you're going to have a higher adoption rate. We typically are the opposite. Our higher upfront costs, our delta between traditional fuels and natural gas and propane, although there's a delta, an improvement, it's not as large of a disparity as it can be overseas. We touched a little bit, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, the various major segments that natural gas is used in pretty much across the board. This is one of our products. DFW uses our product. I saw the other day they had I think it was a 2023 unit that had 220,000 miles on it. So you can do the math on how much money they've saved in 3 years. So enormous amount of miles put on these vehicles. Last mile delivery, that would be UPS, Amazon, those types of entities. Next slide, please. Safety is important. How safe is natural gas? Well, to be fair, it operates at a very high pressure, 3,600 PSI. So there are certain safety things that you need to follow. One of the things that a lot of people find interesting is that the storage tanks are very, very safe. They go through ballistic testing, drop testing, bonfire testing. And what I tell people is the most dangerous thing you have on your gasoline vehicle is your gasoline tank. It's plastic. And you know, we've had studies where people have been rear-ended with CNG tanks, and it's actually saved their life. So they're extremely safe. One of the other safety benefits of natural gas is it's lighter than air. It's a gas. So when there is a leak, when there's an issue, it goes up. It doesn't pool on the ground that can create a further safety issue. And then we're regulated by very strong safety standards. Again, I mentioned I've been doing this for 30 years. It was before me even. And so these regulations and these safety standards have developed over the years to the point that we do have some very solid standards and requirements that we design and build to. Dan mentioned this. It's very reliable. You look at the major fleets in the United States and you say, what are they doing? They're operating natural gas. And so, you know, we have millions of these on the road around the country or around the world, and they continue to trust natural gas to get the job done. Proven technology, and you can see a picture there, right, of Amazon using it for one of their, I think, postal delivery trucks. Next slide, please. Okay, that's it. So there's my contact information. Feel free to reach out if you want to dive deeper onto any of these issues or any of the products that we offer and how that might fit. We do a number of products, even in the Vegas area. We do the RTC units. We've done Southwest Gas. So there's a lot of different things that we do. We have some good relationships there. So we appreciate it. And thanks again, Rosalie, for the ability to do this and share a little bit of the knowledge that I have.
Thank you, Paul. We appreciate you taking the time to speak to our audience. And now we have some time set aside for Q&A. If any further questions have come through in the public input chat, Dominic, could you please let us know?
Let's see. I have a question that I think both Jeff and Paul, you could speak to. What is surprising you about fleet adoption trends over these past couple of years?
I'll jump on it, and then Jeff, you can finish it up. Certainly, EV has been the big talk. There's been a lot of EV adoption. There have been a lot of trials that are out there. So that was, I think, in terms of how much attention EVs got, I think that was a little bit surprising to me. But I think things are leveling off a little bit because things such as I talked about with payload, cost, infrastructure, all those things are now starting to be understood a little bit better by fleets and the public in general. And I think it's all sorting itself out. But certainly that spike a couple of years ago, where it was kind of, let's get rid of everything and let's only go EV, was a little surprising. Now, not everybody did that, but certainly there's a place for EVs. There's a place for all technologies. That would be LANDI's position. But yeah, I would say that spike in interest was interesting.
Yeah, Paul, I was going to make the same comment, although I'll say it probably wasn't a surprise to me, but I think maybe a way to describe it is the trend, as we all know, 3 years ago was very, very much EV. I think the tidbit I'd like to add is I saw kind of the trend reverse, or at least a lot of questioning before the new administration. I think you can say that the new administration has clearly, dismantled a lot of the regulation that was driving EV. But I was hearing fleets talk about a prior, say a year before then. Matter of fact, I was at a session and it had fleets in it, and the fleets were, very pro EV and very, like to talk about and stuff like that. And then I ask a question, so you're going to buy more? And the answer is, well, no, we don't have more. We don't have money. We don't have incentives and things like that. So my point is, I think that kind of the recognition of this, the reality started hitting probably 2 or so years ago and has reversed that trend.
Thank you both for addressing that question.
Can I just add maybe one more thing? Maybe I think it's not so much a surprise, but I think it's really important as we think about the environment that we think not only zero emissions or the value of that, which is what I'd call tank to wheel, but also we think of well to wheel. That's really critical. And I think thinking about some of these solutions, like Dan's mentioned about the carbon intensity of RNG being negative. I mean, you cannot get better than that with EV. And a lot of the other just propane or CNG, even if it's not renewable, have some real good benefit whenever it comes to well to wheels. And we need to be thinking about that as we think about the environment.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. If there are any further questions, you could please submit those now, or feel free to contact our speakers after we finish up.
Thank you, Dominic, and thank you, Paul and Jeff, for staying to field some questions. I have our contact information up on the screen from Southern Nevada Clean Cities Coalition. Dominic and myself are happy to host this meeting as Clean Cities co-directors. And I'd like to thank all of our attendees for joining us today. Once again, a big thank you to our speakers, Dan, Jeff, and Paul, for sharing your expertise and knowledge with the group. We have heard from local fleet professionals that they would like to hear about technologies other than EVs. While that information is very valuable, of course, from the fleet professional perspective, we've been asked to host speakers from the CNG, RNG, and propane world. So thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge. I'd also like to thank our wider team, including Matt and Olivia from Clark County Department of Environment and Sustainability, for supporting today's live stream and helping us get through some technical hurdles, getting this off the ground. As we mentioned previously, this recording will be available later today on the Clark County DES YouTube channel once it is edited and re-uploaded. And I will go ahead and stay on just for a few minutes to ensure that no further questions come through while we have the chat live, and also to ensure that the end of our recording is captured. So thank you again for attending, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.